welcome back to another tier list. Today we will be ranking all of the new cards that were added to the core set, to the newly designed core set on March 30th, along with the release of Forged and the Barons. The core set was implemented to help the game and kind of clean out all the trash cards that weren't used and just made cards more relevant to this day and just more like what Hearthstone is now. Some classes got new cards, some had cards replaced, but a lot of legendaries changed in the core set and a lot were added. So anyway, let's just hop right on into it. Starting off, we have Deathwind. I believe it's the Destroyer. The old Deathwind was really bad because you would just discard your hand all the time. It would have very limited niche situations. Not a very good card. I don't even know what decks you would run it in. Maybe some old classic decks were just because I don't know. It's just Hearthstone's changed so much you just can't really afford them. Deathwind Destroyer is a little bit better, a lot less painful to play. Still has that negative downside though. And it can still work at some capacity, but it's just slightly worse. But I just don't see a world where you'd run this in any deck, apart from maybe like a big druid. So I'm gonna put him in D tier. Novice Zapper. Novice Zapper is a one-drop. Shaman kind of needs those right now. However, they did get the new Murloc, but that's kind of exclusive to Murloc decks. The thing with Novice Zapper is it has spell damage attached to a Flame Imp body, but it's basically Flame Imp, but it has spell damage +1, and instead of dealing 3 damage to you, it does Overload 1, which I would argue dealing 3 damage to your hero is way less painful than overloading 1 mana. Because in Hearthstone, mana is so important to just keep in check and just be careful of, and Overload is just a horrible mechanic that just makes Shaman so bad. It's one of the reasons why it's just not that good. But even then, Novice Zapper is just a really good card for a little extra spell damage or just anything. It's just a solid card. Just the Overload really can. I don't think rating cards S tier with Overload is just safe because Overload is such like just a painful thing. It's like a negative mechanic. Unless like Tunnel Trog, but that's mild. Alright, you have Felsoul Jailer. This card kind of just steals a card from your opponent's hand. It's kind of like a Yoink Warlock, I guess, and just trying to disrupt your opponent, but I think you'd rather run Vol'jin, personally. It's just better. I think Jailer is just one of those cards that's not that good, but not that bad. Like, this is a fine card. Maybe run it if you're just trying to have fun, but if you're trying to make a competitive deck, this is definitely one you should cut. Probably C tier just because you could like yoink your opponent's combo piece and just disrupt their OTK or something. Just because of that, just because of some niche possibilities. But apart from that, card's not that good. We have Overlord Runthak. Now, statistically, hand-buff cards have never been good in Hearthstone, but with Glowstone Technician being unnerved, that doesn't really matter, but well, it was a long time ago. I mean, buffed. I believe it was buffed. And hand-buff kind of coming back into the meta spotlight in Wild. Card just gotten, like, anything hand-buff is good. Samurai's good. Just all those old hand-buff cards that weren't good statistically good in the past have just destroyed all the other decks in Wild right now because of just how good it is. And Runthak is just another card. He's good in Standard. You can use him in that Rush Warrior. Doesn't hurt to play him. He's pretty good. Solid body. Has Rush. He can kind of go infinite a little bit with him, but it's probably not what you're looking to do. You're probably going to get 2 attacks max with Runthak. But still, it's +2/+2 hand buff is pretty good. Pretty good value. Just a solid card. Pretty good card. Definitely better than some of like the old legendaries that we used to have in Classic. Next up is Agwyn. So Agwyn has an extremely powerful effect, being able to carry spell damage over. And not that big of a price to pay. Problem with Agwyn is she kind of does nothing the turn she's played unless you have like a follow-up like spell like the 1 mana, what's it called again? The 1 mana does 1 damage to a minion and its adjacent minions. Shooting Star, yeah, Shooting Star from Boomsday, which is now in the core set as well. That can go pretty good with her. You know, I think you just want a cheap spell. You can also use Clown OTK. This seems pretty good to get all that extra value, but just it's kind of painful to just do it like sit on a turn for nothing or in Hearthstone. It's just kind of Yeah, it's a decent card though. Next up is Alexstrasza, the Life Binder. Now, Alexstrasza is a pretty good card. Probably better than consistently better than the old Alexstrasza. It's not like a card that does nothing the turn it's played. It's pretty good. Like it, like when you look at like the old Alexstrasza, it's kind of like a risky card to play because it can do a ton of damage or just restore health to you. But it doesn't really interact with the board at all. And this one can kind of stabilize and makes it so much better. This is played in Control Warlock, Control Priest, Control Shaman, if that people even play that right now. Just very solid card. Just pretty much auto include in all control decks. Control Warrior as well, Control Demon Hunter. What else is there? You can Tenwu Rogue. Yep. Like everything runs that card. Very good. Pretty solid actually. Like if I were a new player, I'd be extremely happy to get this card in the core set because it's pretty generous of Blizzard to give such like a meta defining card, as we'll see with cards like one or two other cards in this core set that were added newly. Next up is Vanessa. Now Vanessa's kind of a weird legendary because I don't really like her too much because it kind of like RNG reliant on what your opponent does or if they know like Rogue's matchup. But the thing with Vanessa is I don't think the opponent really needs to know because you probably shouldn't be playing Vanessa in the first place. I mean, she is kind of good value, but I just don't think Vanessa is needed in row decks, especially when you can just run a more important card or an extra card that can really push you there. Instead of just, oh, let's just run the new core set legendary. I don't really think she's good enough to run in Thief Rogue personally. Yeah, I just think she's a meh card. She's definitely not bad, but she's not like she's just inconsistent. If she could discover the card, she would be extremely strong. But nope, sadly not. Or discover like one from like the last 3 cards your opponent's played or something. Yeah, it's just kind of just niche. Bloodsail Deckhand. Now the Bloodsail Deckhand can cheat out Ankar and Wild for 1 mana cheaper on turn 2, very powerful. Can cheat out Outriders, Action Standard on turn 3, pretty good. This card is crazy in like Pirate Warrior decks. I don't think it's quite Esther because sometimes it just sits there and does nothing. Or you don't have a weapon or don't draw a weapon. I do think it's a pretty solid pirate though, and I think that most Pirate Warriors should consider it. Especially mana is so important to manage in those decks and just trying to play as much as possible and just keep the engines going, and for those decks you just don't want to run out of fuel. This card, oh bad. This card kind of starts the engines and continues it a little longer. It's pretty good. Crimson Clergy. Oh, it's also cheap for cannons and the other from both of the cannon like cards from both Descent and I believe it was GVG, Ship's Cannon and Skybarge. Yep, probably Skybarge. I don't remember. I think it's the Skybarge, and then Clemson. Oh my god, I take a minute. Crimson Clergy. Oh my god. Now Clergy doesn't really find a home. I guess you run Control Priest, but I don't think Priests really want to run one drops. I think they'd rather run an extra spell or two. I think Clergy has a pretty powerful effect, but what I see is just a weaker what's it called again? The 1 mana 1/3 that draws a card whenever you heal. I cannot believe I can Northshire Cleric. There you go. It's just worse than it. I mean, this card can be good in Rally Priest, but I don't think most people don't really play that. Just don't think it's like really worth it, or it's not runnable. The Spellweaver is just Malygos Spellweaver is just a downgrade from the original Malygos. Still pretty good, especially in the Celestial Alignment decks. Decks that want to draw a whole bunch of cards, Control Priest, etc., etc. I have found that with this card in the new Ysera, you both can like be very cautious on playing them because of your hand. Hand management can be really awkward in Priest. So I think I'm probably gonna place them around the same. I personally think Malygos is better. I just don't think that most people ever really play the new Ysera card. It's kind of a overrated card, but still a decent card. Thrive in the Shadows is pretty good. I think of it as just a worse Shadow Visions, but it's still good. Runnable in most priest decks, kind of just digs for your spell, but at the end of the day, it's a 2-mana spell that fishes for another spell. Still pretty solid card though. Priest will definitely want to run this in pretty much every deck I play to fish for that Palm Reading or Insight or whatever they need at the moment. Silence or Cthulhu Piece. Yeah, they can just do anything in that spell priest deck. Ysera the Dreamer. Ysera adds good value to your hands. Kind of crazy value actually. Way better than the old Ysera. Way better because it just doesn't have to wait end of turn. Which, yeah, they did nerf some of them or change some of them, however, and I don't think she's as good anymore. I mean, no, this card's way better than the old one. But some of like the treasures or no emerald cards you can get from her are just not as useful as they once were. I mean, they're still good, but I don't know. I just think she's overrated, especially when people are giving her 5 stars. She's also really awkward in hand, trying to thin out your hand. It has 5 cards that you probably don't even want that badly. I think she's still decent, but she's also like a card that really does nothing for a turn. I guess it adds a sap, but I just find myself in so many awkward situations I can't really justify giving her any higher of a rating. Enslaved Fellord. I don't think this card should see play in Standard unless you're looking to corrupt a Ticketus or something. I think where this card really would be played is in Wild. I mean, Standard it kind of works as Willow, just another Willow engine, replacing the things that we lose. I think we lose Willow at the same time as those cards, so it's kind of funny. But I think that Slave Fellord finds itself in a niche where it's not good enough to be run in Wild or Standard. I mean, Standard maybe, but Wild definitely not because of Void Colors and everything else. Just Voidlords. And it just feels kind of meh. I mean, Standard could see play, but I just don't really think it's that great. Focus Spell is okay. It doesn't seem too good because when Preach Silence and Minion, it's still giving it 3 health. This feels worse than like the normal card of Silence. I mean, you can play in Silence Priest, but no one really plays that. It still can work sometimes and do its job, but it just feels kind of meh. Probably not run in most pre-decks. It might be pre-decks might be the decent discover option sometimes. I don't know. Boxtail Freebooter is really good after N'Zoth's N'Zoth's first mate in Wild. Very strong. Kind of secure. Maybe Rep and Rogue, but it's sometimes it can feel kind of niche. Sometimes it feels incredibly powerful. I think this card is pretty solid. Should be running in almost every like pirate deck that, not every pirate deck, but like Pirate Rogue, Pirate Warrior, which is pretty much every pirate deck actually. But as long as you can stick a cheap weapon on board pretty quickly and just start going ham on your opponent, it's pretty good. Gnarv Glavesmith. It's basically a 3-mana 3/3 destroy your opponent's 3-drop or deal 3 damage or something like that. In general, that's pretty good. Like very good actually, but the problem with this card is it needs to be outcasted. I find that this card works a lot because I can just pretty much cycle my hand pretty quickly without losing the cards in order I want to play them. I think Outcast can be a pretty punishing mechanic at times, but I feel like this Glavesmith, especially in lower cost Demon Hunter decks, can really get like the job done, putting a little tempo and a little more damage in. I feel like it's pretty solid. It's kind of floating between B and C, but I'm gonna say B just because of experiences I've had. Can run an Outcast Demon Hunter kind of like an off meta deck, but that's what I like to play with it with Corvus. But yeah, pretty decent. Then the Illidar Inquisitor, Power Creep Ragnaros, Power Creep King Crush. That's kind of what people think. I think this card is ridiculous. Probably should get changed. At least not attack when it's frozen. Just bust through defenses and your opposing Demon Hunter can just like absolutely just wreck you with this card. Is kind of the reason why Demon Hunters are actually like playable right now. I mean, they're still decent, but it's one of the reasons why they're pretty darn good. At times because of this card. This card can just go over the top. This card can single-handedly just win matchups for you. It probably has like the best played win rate of the deck. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like I would not be surprised if this got nerfed eventually someday. And then Corvus. Corvus feels like a weird card because I tried running with run her two ways: a value Corvus deck with Zay. Wait, is that what it is? Zai. Incredible. Zai can add another copy of Zale, so you have two Zales, but I don't really know. It kind of keeps your level like chipping away at your opponent. That seems kind of niche. I don't know. Maybe an Alture's deck and Wild in the other way is just a cheap aggro deck that just kind of just goes after your opponent. A cheap outcast and just kind of cycles and stuff. I think she's okay. I just feel like the card just doesn't feel. It can feel awkward at times, and if you don't have the mana to do this stuff, it feels a tiny bit weak. But I still think Corvus is decent. It just can feel very awkward at times. Do you want to save Corvus even though you could just use it for a better trade? And yeah, this really relies heavily on cycling your I-beams with it late game to kind of dish out a little more damage. Especially since Twin Slice is gone into Wild. Really hurts for Demon Hunter. Next, there's no Droidsel Druid. Maybe run it in a Token Druid deck. She's pretty good. You basically play it for a 1 mana 3/5. Best case scenario. Then you can also buff it like an Arbor Up or something. That actually sounds incredibly powerful on paper. However, like Guff, I don't really think you should play that many minions in Token Druid other than like Gibberlin and maybe one other that I can't think of right now. It's just kind of risky. I'd rather just do like the old-fashioned just fill your board up with like minions off of spells instead of just play minions outright. I feel like it can be good. The potential is there. It just, yeah, 1 mana 3/5 is kind of crazy. But I feel like in most case scenarios, the card's not even gonna really do much, especially since no one's running it in the Token Druid list. So when I first saw this card, I was thinking of kind of a mid-range Druid, but that's not really a thing. Hopefully we get some of that in later expansions, but I doubt this card. I don't know. It just feels like a decent card. Like, actually, I'm gonna drop it in a C because it doesn't really feel like something Druid will kind of run. I mean, maybe in Token, but that's about it. Nazrumi the Eternal. Just pretty horrible card. Kind of a meme card. They even didn't introduce Nazrmu Day in like the 15th of every month or something. I don't know. I'm not really that big of a fan of Nazrmu. This feels kind of not that fun to play with either way. I don't care what people say. I think that it's kind of a fun card in Hearthstone, but I think the better way to implement Nazrumi would have been to add a mode and not just completely trash the card. It kind of made me upset when I saw it because I thought they were going to rework Nazrumi, but I don't know, man. I don't know. But next year, the Broodmother, this card is like Shuma, better and worse. It just depends what people say. I think it's worse because Shuma comes down earlier and stuff. This one's like end of each turn, I believe. Is Shuma like that? I don't remember. I don't think so. I think it's start of your turn or end of turn. I think it's end of your turn, yeah. I'm still okay though. League's better than the old Onyxia. Even close. But it kind of gets overshadowed by the other ones, but it can be a very nice where this card really shines is just being a discover option from Draconic Studies or something like that. You can cheat it out a turn or two early in Priest. This feels okay. Probably not a runnable card in decks though. Pursuit of Justice. This card is very strange because I feel like this card can actually just bully your opponent by. I was playing Dude Paladin or Sylvan Recruit Paladin in Standard and Wild. You only run this one in the Standard list because Lothraxian and all the other odd cost cards like Baku, you just can't play it in that list. I mean, I guess you could play even Paladin Wild, but I don't really think you should do that. You're probably just better off running Call to Arms even Paladin, which is already a really good deck. But then you could just run regular Call to Arms Paladin instead of just Call to Arms Paladin. But I do think this card has a problem with kind of messing up your early game slots. You're probably going to end up playing this card like turn 5 or 6 or 7 or something, and then it just feels like you have a card floating in hand, and it just feels kind of meh. It's very inconsistent, but can have power spike. Sometimes it's like S tier or something, but most of the time it's like C tier, and just really, really underwhelming. Next is Reckoning. I'd say this is probably one of the best Paladin secrets. Actually pretty consistent. Can really mess up your opponent's like tempo or aggro or whatever. Decent stop to stuff. It's not the strongest card in the world because it's a Paladin secret, of course, but it's decent. It's decent. Depends on the list where you run it though. Ritual of Doom. This card's kind of strange. It kind of forces you to play like a cheap Warlock. I see this card in Wild in that one 0 cost discard deck with all those small little minions like Wisps, Snow Flippers, and Tiny Fins. I don't really. That deck seems okay. Um, I tried this deck in like a Gandalin Warlock in Standard, or know some people that have, and the card can feel pretty good, but sometimes it just floats in hand. It's just kind of awkward. Sometimes it can be jump, sometimes it can just be bad. I have to put in C. C, it's not the worst card ever though. Selective Breeder, this card is pretty good actually. Kind of fish for Crush or something, just find your Discover options. Decent solid edition Hunter deck, find the extra card you want. Shadowed Spirit. I believe that's what it's called. This card is running Rally Priest. That's about it. You probably don't really want this card. Card's just worse as Cobalt Sand Trooper because more expensive. I don't know if it's an elemental or not. I'm not sure. Probably not. I don't know. I mean, it's okay at Rally Priest, but I think I'd rather run the peon guy, whatever his name is. Dragon, is it Dragon Maw Overseer? I think that's what it is. I'd just rather run them and the Nazmani. Yeah, and stuff like that, and Voracious. This you don't really have a spot in this deck for this card, and plus Priest isn't gonna really want to run it normally either way, unless it's Rally Priest. Talon Fortune. Oh, you could play like a really facey aggro Priest in Wild, but I just don't think that's gonna work out. Talon Fortune is extremely good. Arguably better, arguably worse, arguably better than Polka in some. My gosh, I can't speak. In some situations, um, very powerful. The fact that he has Taunt, Divine Shield, pretty strong. I don't think this card should get checked out. I think the card's perfectly balanced and fine. But being able to draw your Cthulhu or your combo piece you need, or your whatever it is, your Inquisitor or your Asheraj or whatever you want in your deck, it can just be incredibly powerful in this ultimate power spike. Oh, even more Josh. Like this card enables so many decks, and even then controls that isn't prominent at all. But it's still extremely good. War Cache seems like a decent warrior value card, but when I've used this card, it just gives me crap. Like this ain't that good. And then Warsun Outrider, it's decent stat line, actually not that bad. Just a straight up better militia commander, which was actually played in the day and actually very good in Witchwood. But times have changed in Hearthstone. I don't think I'm gonna give this card D though. It's just probably doesn't even get played in Rush Warrior because of how expensive it is, and you'd rather run like other cards. Plus that deck, it's very fit slots that you just want to always have, and you don't have very much wiggle room in Rush Warrior. So I'm gonna give it C. And yeah, that is the new core set tier list. Anyways, thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more content like this.